Now I ask the World Bank representative, Ms. Katarina MATHERNOVA, to give us a presentation on the latest policy paper of the World Bank on the Roma integration in Slovakia. Ms. MATHERNOVA will have to leave soon, therefore we moved her presentation to this session, and we would use the opportunity and then ask the Slovak government representative also to comment what we hear now from Ms. MATHERNOVA.
Thank you very much, Tundi. It's working, the mic? Yes. I will try to be disciplined, and I asked my colleague Mariana to signal when I'm going to run out into a danger of running out of time. But just very briefly, we'll give you an overview of an engagement that we had with the Slovak Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs and Family, and like this? Okay, sorry. And detailed work with the Office of the Plenipotentiary and other institutions in Slovakia that asked us to analyze the situation of the Roma from the economic and social perspective, and really build and use the data that we were able to obtain together with our friends from UNDP, financed by the European Commission in 2011. You heard about the... There is a bad echo. Okay, so let's reboot and start again. I'll try to have Mariana change the slides. So, as you all know about, unfortunately, no big splash about the data ever happened, but one of the key brochures that started out the slow leakage of the data from the largest ever marginalized Roma survey of 2011 is slowly making its way out. The brochure that UNDP and the Fundamental Rights Agency did was in the morning on the table. And on the basis of this very, very large and robust based on the very large and robust statistical sample, we were able to really delve deeply into the number of areas that are relevant for Roma inclusion. And in the case of Slovakia, this survey was representative of 83% of all Roma in the country. Therefore, 83% are marginalized Roma, 17% are integrated Roma. So this is really a fairly strong statistical evidence which was very much in sync and very comparable data with something that Danush Koblav from UNDP did a year earlier in 2010 on Slovakia only. This representativeness of the survey is very similar across the countries. It ranges from around 77 to around 90%, and the survey was financed by DG Regio and conducted in 5 new member states: Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, and then UNDP extended some of the survey beyond, also into the Western Balkans. We also used the EU yearly survey on income and living conditions, and then widely consulted. And widely consulted on the report. Now, the results of this work, which I'll very briefly only mention, came at a very opportune time from the government dialogue and the situation in the European Union. We talked a lot about the EU framework for national Roma integration. We, of course, commented on the Slovak strategy, but much more importantly, the results of this work came literally within weeks of something that, as we discussed in our previous panel on where to move with the decade, came within weeks of a new process in the EU where the European Union requires member states to submit its budgets and go through something called the new economic governance cycle, which is increasing in importance, and quite interestingly, the Roma integration and inclusion of the Roma in the member states with large Roma populations has been incorporated into this process. In the case of Bulgaria and Hungary, this thing called country-specific recommendations that the Commission and the European Council announced asked for implementation of the EU strategy, of the National Roma Integration Strategy. In the case of Slovakia, it became much more binding, and actually one of the recommendations, one of the only 7 recommendations that the country received was a detailed prescription in the areas of employment and education on Roma integration, essentially making a very strong and binding target that the Commission will be able to use. And this is both a reflection of the raised awareness inside the EU and inside the Commission of the importance to integrate the Roma, whether it's for demographic trends, whether it's for the large gap between the Roma and the majority population. But it's also, as the data has shown us quite clearly, a reflection of the very specifically troubled and problematic situation that Slovakia is in, where it is really, in a sense, an outlier from the pack. Certainly within the European Union, having the most shocking statistics and situation. For example, so just to show 2 or 3, this is an example of what we are now able to do based on the 2011 survey, where this on the right side is the entire population of Slovakia, including the sizable Roma population, and on the left side is the marginalized Roma, again representing 83% of the Roma population. You see that the 2 demographic pyramids look like as if they were from 2 different countries. First, to be cynical, we don't have to worry about social security and pensions for the Roma. They all will die. They will not reach the pension age compared to here. But we do need to worry about what kind of education and skills and employment opportunities these Roma kids will have, because the kids on the non-Roma side are shrinking. So who's going to work on the pensions for this population? It is going to have to come from there. So it very much, I know I'm putting it very crudely and cynically, but just these 2 pyramids really show the extreme societal interest for all reasons, from human rights perspective to economic survival perspective, of the need to really seriously work on having inclusionary policies, on having kids go to kindergarten, schools, get skills that will enable them to succeed in life, have decent living conditions, have good health standards, and be able to contribute to the common good. So we found this particular demographic pyramids rather shocking. Another example is Slovakia has the largest employment gap in the region. On the left side, it's men. On the right side, it's women. So when you look at the distance between the green and the blue, that's the distance between Roma and the general population. But what is much more interesting, the survey was not measuring all majority population. It was measuring marginalized Roma vis-a-vis their non-Roma neighbors. In other words, people who share similar characteristics, live next to each other, etc. You see that non-Roma neighbors have 66% employment, Roma 20. In the case of women, it's even more dramatic. It's 52 or 26 in that case, and 9. Again, and this is a story that's unfortunately very, very similar across the new member states, extremely low secondary education outcomes for Roma versus non-Roma. So here is very briefly few of the recommendations that we have provided the government, and they really sort of comprise several elements. One is we have discovered in Slovakia that it's a country, and it's not tremendously different to others. Perhaps the concentration of such practices is more prevalent here. There are faulty policies. There are policies in place through laws and through government decrees that may have intention behind them of being inclusionary and have a clear exclusionary impact. So we were talking about changing policies. We were talking about changing policies, whether it's via laws or government decrees or whatever the need be. We also talked about need to build institutions and strengthen institutions. And of course, we talked about implementation of a number of the policies, because that, of course, is the ill of this part of the world. But in the case of Roma inclusion, it's very relevant. So just some highlights. In employment, we talked about improving job search incentives, the institutions that provide job search, improve skills, but continue providing strong safety net support, but with incentives built into it through conditional cash transfers, etc. In the education area, it will not surprise you, the three highlights were massive investment in early childhood education from the age of 3, stop the practice of streaming kids into schools for mentally handicapped, which unfortunately has risen since the end of the communist times quite dramatically in Slovakia, and is still a fact of life. And improve the transfer between primary and secondary school, also by increasing the age, the mandatory schooling age, as well as mandatory schooling hours. In housing, we talked about both in situ improvements as well as a range of tools to help people upgrade their housing, and the need to have the government really take ownership of the issue and start massively a process of legalizing settlements rather than throwing people out onto the street, which unfortunately doesn't happen only outside the EU. It does happen in Slovakia almost on a weekly basis. For health, we talked about both evaluating and then massively expanding the program of Roma health mediators, as well as increase in public health provision. And we also introduced an area that doesn't really exist yet in the EU framework, but we think it's really a critical one for Roma inclusion, that's financial inclusion and financial literacy that should be also massively spread, because that's an area that can help with home improvements and providing savings habit and ability of the marginalized Roma to smoothen the shocks of consumption. We also suggested to take advantage of poverty mapping, which is a process that all the new member states are going through with the Commission now, because one of the lessons from the programming of the structural funds was that there was no correlation between investments, even in small infrastructure, and the poverty in the countries. And now the Commission wants to make changes in it. And Mariana is signaling me that I only have a few minutes, so I'll end on a hopefully positive note. The situation is dire, but we all feel that there will be something happening in Slovakia, and the fact that the soon-to-be Slovak plenipotentiary, new Slovak plenipotentiary for Roma communities is here with us is hopefully evidence of that. But there is also another piece of good news, and that's the programming of the next generation of the structural funds. This, I think, can be a game changer for Roma inclusion. A game changer that we haven't had ever, really, because we have the awareness of the problem, we have commitment by the EU institutions. We are slowly but surely getting the governments committed. We have commitment of the EU beyond EU borders, as Detlef was talking this morning about the IPA programming for the candidate and potential candidate countries. And so the tools will be there, and we now have some instruments of naming and shaming and peer pressure to really make governments put their money where their mouth is. And this could be an opportunity to really seriously invest in all the areas where investment is needed. Because as Mustafa, Minister from Macedonia, was talking about in one of the panels, it's all fine to have nice diplomatic talk, but unless you put money behind it, nothing is moving. So I really think that this is an opportunity that should not be missed. I know that looking at two colleagues from the Commission, they happen to be not from the DGs that will be programming the money. I haven't seen anybody from DG Employment. Hopefully the message will also make it there, and a colleague from DG Regio had to leave. But this is really something that we should not collectively miss the boat on. But there are some preconditions. One is, to do so, one needs capacity. One needs capacity both on the Commission side and, more importantly, on the programming government side and in the project preparations, etc. The Commission is very generous in providing TA resources to contract such capacity, but it needs to be done. And also, very importantly, very importantly, the structural funds themselves. Now, I'm not talking about IPA and the Western Balkans, Turkey, but inside the EU. The Social Fund and the Regional Development Fund need to be financed and programmed together. And with that, one really should not have money as the main constraint. And I think this could be a game changer that we didn't have before. So I think the awareness with money and political will, or push if there is no political will, could bring some really tangible results and could make the second part of the decade or the third part of the decade perhaps more successful. Thank you.